Okay, let's get started. Welcome, everyone. It's great to see such a big crowd out here tonight. My name is Nicholas Manousis. I'm the president of the Horological Society of New York, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our October meeting. We'll get started with a quick education update. We just finished a weekend of classes in San Francisco that were very successful. And I'm pleased to announce that over the weekend of October 12th through the 13th, we're going to be hosting another weekend of our traveling education classes in Washington, D.C., hosted by McDowell Time. We also have a special New York weekend class on October 19th. And of course, we have our evening classes throughout the month of October here in New York, upstairs in our classroom on the 5th floor. So if you're looking for a class, check our website. There's still some availability, and if you have any friends in Washington, D.C., let them know that we are coming their way soon. Okay, so I'm going to get right to the lecture tonight because we've got a lot of interesting things to cover. So in-house movements, manufacturer movements, proprietary movements, whatever you like to call them, I think we can all agree it's well known how popular these movements are today in mechanical watches. But what's not so well known is what goes into making them, both from a technical and a financial perspective. And so tonight, that's what we're going to take a look at. We're going to pull back that veil a little bit. We're going to take a look at some of the details that go into making a proprietary mechanical watch movement. Our guests for the evening are four-time winners of the GPHG Golden Hand Award, which is the Oscars of watchmaking. And they have flown all the way from Austria to join us tonight. So please join me in welcoming Maria and Richard Habring.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Good evening. This is so, yeah. No, it's fine for me.
Welcome from our side as well. It's an enormous pleasure to be here in New York. It took quite some years to come again from the last time. The bigger is the pleasure right now, especially when seeing such an audience here. Thanks to the Horological Society of New York, thanks to Nick and all involved. How great to see so many people interested in what is our daily business. What we would like to share with you tonight is we would like to add a perspective which is usually not very typical for the watch industry, since when, as Nicholas said, manufacturing movements, proprietary, in-house movements, sometimes difficult to figure out. Big brands, for the big brands, it's very common, very usual. For smaller brands, the smaller a brand gets, the more difficult it gets to argue with such things. And this is what we would like to share some light on how can a small family business afford to design and produce a in-house watch movement. My part is at Habring to the technical part. I'm very happy and privileged to being able to focus on this part, as I have the privilege to have the very best CEO I ever had in my business life. So you will excuse that Mrs. Habring will join a little later when it comes to numbers, especially when it comes to costs. And of course, she will be available for the questions and answers as well. But since the lecture is rather a little more technical,
Take a seat, enjoy this very nice lecture with my husband. Wish you a nice lecture, enjoy it, please, and we talk later.
Starting with a saying which lasts back to my very first beginning in watch industry, when I joined in 1990, a well-known company in Schaffhausen, the one with the 3 letters, and I was very happy and privileged to have not only a CEO and boss there. I would even go further and would call him a mentor. He became a mentor over the following 6 years in Schaffhausen and another 5 years in Glashütte in Saxony, till he unfortunately passed away in 2001. In the very early 1990s, there was a kind of hype in this little town in eastern Switzerland, Schaffhausen. And I well remember we had a lot of guests there on company tours and visiting the production facilities, and quite a few of them used to ask at that time, Mr. Blümlein, why are you using ETA movements? And this was actually what Mr. Blümlein used to answer. Consider IWC was not that brand as it used to be today. It was much smaller. The crisis was just over. They just found a new line to build on, and yeah, it was a very inspiring time. But it was not from technical perspective a time where we could take everything we wanted to have. So we had to we had to stay calm and go on, and yeah, it takes 1 million to make a new mechanical movement, which was quite a lot at that time, and yeah, considered with price increases since that time, it's even much more today. So how can a small family business afford that? Well, as many smaller or even mid-scale watch manufacturers, watch brands, we used to start with ETA movements in the very beginning, starting in 2004, and you will recognize them on the left very well. ETA 6498 though in very nice execution, but nothing very exceptional. We even had a tourbillon on top, as seen on the left, and but that was not really very intriguing, especially not for the watch technician. We entered ETA directly in 2007 when they launched their Valgrange movement. It was a new automatic movement of 36 millimeters. And this Valgrange movement was intriguing since it was built on a platform which I was very familiar with, the ETA Valjoux 7750, just reduced to an automatic movement, a bigger automatic movement with a center seconds. And we approached ETA in 2007 asking them, can we buy some movements? And they said, of course, sure, no problem. How many you want? And said, well, let's buy, I don't remember, was it 15 each or something like that? So a very small volume, and they have been fine with that, absolutely no problem. However, we didn't want to use the movement as it was. So since we had some smaller complications before already as a deadbeat second in 2005, we wanted the deadbeat second in 2007 to be a major part of this new movement use. So we integrated. We did design on our own a new deadbeat second device. And integrated in this movement, and this became in 2007 our base. In 2008, we went further. We launched our very first chronograph, which has been the Chrono COS for Crown Operation System, the first chrono without pushers, just operated by a crown. We have some pieces here. If you like to see them later, no problem. This movement here shown underneath even has a tourbillon, so we've been seriously working on that movement base towards 2009, where we reduced the diameter to 30 millimeters again, adding an bidirectional automatic winding on top of this movement. And in 2009, we approached ETA again and told them, listen, we have a problem with this 36 millimeter movement, and we don't want to buy movements from you only. We would like to buy the parts separated. We would like to buy kits. And you know what they said? Yes, sure, no problem. However, it did not take long. In 2011, in December 2011, we received a letter from ETA stating that selling us movement kits was just exceptional for the last years. And since we bought in this year, 2011, already a certain amount of parts, yeah, that's fine, everything is okay, but they are not gonna supply the same quantity anymore in the following year, and with 2013, they will cut us off completely. So in 2012, they gave us 7,000 parts, which means parts. A part could have been a main plate as well as a screw or a wheel, so 7,000 parts in total, and 2013, 0, except spare parts needed to repair the movements we bought from them in the past. However, there is a side note about the spare parts in 2017. This was actually in 2013. We definitely been able to buy parts, but this ended in 2017 when ETA kicked us out completely. They are not selling us any parts anymore. I'm not complaining about that. Don't misunderstand. They are not selling us any parts anymore. But the funny thing was their explanation why they are not selling any parts, because they insist and they tell everybody, public, that they are selling spare parts to brands. And we approached them and asked them, why are you not selling parts to us? And they told us, it's simple, you are not a brand. So we asked them, okay, what makes for ETA a brand? And they told us, a brand buys at least 100 movements of one type per year at ETA. Whether it's a mechanical movement or a quartz movement. So yes, but you don't sell us mechanical movements. Yes, but you can buy quartz movement. But why should we buy quartz movements? That's not our problem. However, you see, this kind of discussion felt to us very, very quick as being rather useless. So we started to put our energy very quick to seek for alternatives. And as you see, no alternative available. In fact, there was just this year, Selita launched the SW500, which is a replacement for the 7750. It's not a clone really, but it replaces it very well. But When we approached Celita, they told us, yes, you can order movements, no problem. The only problem is we don't have the capacities yet. You get them in 18 months, but you have to pay them 100% upfront. And then, this was the day Mrs. Habring decided, okay, so let's do our own. We are not the Bank of Celita. So if we have to be a bank, then let's be a bank of ourselves. And so our adventure started. My approach to watch design, watch construction is very simple. I'm a watchmaker. I learned watchmaking in the Austrian watchmaking school. I formed myself after the school, after the 4-year schools in restoration and reparation of antique watches, and moved via this restoration, reparation, and the replacing of missing parts in old movements into the redesigning, reconstruction of parts. So this is basically my approach. I'm not a studied constructor. I was privileged to work in the industry as an engineer when this possibility was still given, and so our approach was very, yeah, let's call it simple, let's call it very pragmatic. We've been studying at first, okay, what do we need? We had at that time already, since we started in 2007, to add small complications on top of our movements. We had a deadbeat second in 2007. We had this mentioned COS in 2008. We had this bidirectional winding mechanism at 2009. We had a chronograph version with a central minute counter. We had our so-called foudroyant, a foudroyant hand making 1 turn per second in combination with our deadbeat second, and all those inventions we wanted to keep. We didn't want to give them up just because Mr. Hayek thinks we should. So we wanted to keep them, and as you see here on this sketch, this did not leave us a lot of room. I would have liked to start to create a watch movement completely from the scratch, completely free, doing a piece of art of it, but since we didn't want to lose all the years we spent before in these very nice small complications, we decided to rather stay with a very similar base as we used to have with the 7750 train gear, and we wanted to develop it further. In the end, after we closed this study, it took us a few weeks, we ended up with 35 parts. In total, we need of this new movement to replace the 7750 parts. 35 parts means, in terms of service, 35 parts. In fact, they are more because at each wheel, for instance, here is counted as 1. Though there is an axle, there's a pinion, and there's a wheel, so in fact there are 2 parts to produce. So in fact they have been a little bit more, but just to indicate this was about what was the challenge. The 7750, 7760 as a hand movement is a design done by Edmond Capt. He used to be a very young watch technician when he started in the early 1970s, trying to help Valjean to survive in this beginning crisis. And everybody who has experience with this movement knows about the pros and the cons of this movement. For me, it's one of the most reliable chronograph movements out in watchmaking world. Some find it rude, some find it not refined enough for what we had in mind with Habring 2. It was the perfect piece. So we analyzed Mr. Kapt's design and ended up with a very similar configuration, but with some modifications on several parts to optimize the production for our needs. This very pragmatic approach I was talking about told us to identify what we call critical parts or critical functions in this movement. It is not a miracle to make a gear train so far if the profile for the wheels is well known. I mean, there are norm sheets with the calculations. It's pretty easy to calculate, and if the quality, if the production of the parts of the wheels itself is on high quality, then there is not really a problem. And as somebody who was before very much into prototyping of mechanical watch movements, we identified, for instance, those gears working over an angle. As you see here, we have a winding pinion and the crown wheel, or when it comes to hand setting, we have the same thing with the sliding pinion and the setting wheel. Those kind of gears are kind of critical, as the positioning of the wheels has to be pretty precise, and so this came to account when we started to redesign all those parts. Meanwhile, there are technical devices available on the market, projectors, video projectors, where you can take a watch part, a wheel, whatsoever, any part, you can put it inside, and you let the device measure all the parts and get a video image as a copy. We didn't have this this device. We still don't have it. So what we did, even though some parts might look familiar to the professionals, all those parts had to be redesigned from scratch for us. The most critical functional group in the entire process was the escapement. Why the escapement? There are companies in Switzerland who are offering this escapement of this mentioned pointage. Pointage is this kind of a type which has been used by Nivarox to give it a name, and there are companies supplying such assortments, but again, we discussed internally and we said, well, it does not really make sense to get out of a monopole by ETA to get into a new monopole by Selita or any other monopole by a supplier of such critical components. So we said, okay, we have to invest some more time, and in order to really make sure it works, we have to start with this escapement. So in very early 2012, we started just to focus on this very particular escapement, which means escapement wheel, the pallet fork, and the balance, which is not indicated here. So we started to produce those parts in very low volumes. When we talk about low volumes, then this means about lots of about 500 pieces each. This was already quite an financial investment, as for this volumes, the only really senseful production technology was the Liga. Is the Liga treatment familiar. For those who are not familiar with Liga, please Google Liga and Mimotech. You will find on YouTube a great video they did about how this Liga treatment produces parts. Liga means lithographic galvanic forming. In opposite to classical production of watch parts, it's really the opposite. The parts are not cutted or crafted out of any flat material or something like that. This Liga forms parts in silicon forms by galvanic treatment. So the part grows inside the form. Very interesting. Check out that video if you have time. This was quite the first bigger investment we had to do, because those toolings, those forms for the Liga are pretty expensive. And we started after we had the very first parts delivered, which means all the pellet forks are separate, all the involved parts are separate, so we had to assemble them together. We had to put the pellet stones inside, we had to put the axles inside, the security pins, everything had to be assembled. And same was with the balance wheel, for instance. Yeah. We got, we even been lucky to find a manufacturer of automotive parts in Austria who was able to do our balance wheels, so just the wheel itself. The axles came from Switzerland, and the hairsprings from Germany, from this one meanwhile existing alternative aside Niverox, which is Karl Haas, Karl Haas in Schramberg, which Karl Haas used to be the long time ago supplier of German Junghans, which was once one of the biggest watch producers on mechanical watches. And yeah, we taught ourselves not only to assemble escapement wheels or pellet forks, we taught ourselves for those who are inside repair and restoration of antique watches. And luckily, when I attended watchmaking school in Austria, this was still part of the school that we got taught how to replace hairsprings. If we had raw hairsprings to use. So we started to do our very own hairsprings. This shows our device, how we are counting the frequency. This does not happen on any machines. This happens really on the final movement with a very special device. All those parts before, so all those escapements, after we finished them, we just took them, and at that time we still been working with the last remaining kits delivered from ETA, but we took the Niverox assortments away, the escapements, and we used our very own. So we started in about late 2012, early 2013. We started to make a field test with our very own escapement inside these ETA-based movements. And while going further with the movement and the movement design and the production of all the parts of the static parts, we had the very first field tests with the escapement already, and could, if necessary, already adapt our processes as well as the production. Luckily, it turned out that we've been with our reliability on this escapement it was really luck on quite a high level. So we have been with the first approach. We have been already above 90% of the Niverox quality, which was really lucky because we've been prepared for some different results. However, we went further. We designed the bridges, all necessary things. But of course, here in opposite to the original 7750 approach, really to be optimized for small series production. This means we went for CNC milling, of course, and finer treatment, better surfaces, better finish. When it comes to the assembly of wheels or all other parts, setting levers, everything can be done manual, and this is where it turns out what is the advantage of us being a small family company. We are currently planning to do this year about 180 watches. A maximum of 200 watches is about. So what we can do in this year. It is not really a big problem to assemble all those parts in those quantities. Consider brands like, I mean, some of my former colleagues running brands like Uhrentechnik, for instance, as CEO of Nomos. They cannot do it like that. They have to go for industrial solutions, since they need about 30,000 pieces per year. So they cannot assemble and rivet every single wheel or even setting levers by hand. Here is the setting lever exposed to show the difference between the original 7750 approach, which is a stamped piece with a riveted axle, and ours to compare it with much better surface qualities. But of course, this causes a major price difference from the industrial part to this, what we call in-house, even though those parts are produced in collaboration with real specialists. But as mentioned, this disadvantage of small series production. So if we are suffering, if I dare to say so, if we are suffering when doing such a movement, then it's rather on the cost side, because we are talking about, depending to the part itself, whether it's a main plate, a wheel, a winding wheel, a jewel, a pin, whatsoever. We are talking about 3 times to 8 times of the components cost compared with the industrial approach. Everything can be done, basically, but it's a question of cost. Our original approach was not that we wanted to produce everything in-house. I mean, if you would have asked me in 2010, are you happy with your ETA-based movement? I would have said, yes, that's great. It's reliable. I'm absolutely happy, and we are able to base on a really solid, reliable industrial base, and can make a racing engine out of it, without need to do everything on our own. After starting this A11, out of this mentioned need, of course we had to look for suppliers who are able to help us in this entire project, as it was not planned to produce all our parts ourselves. We did all the prototype parts ourselves by hand in our own workshop. We have no CNC machine involved, everything conventional machines, Schaublin lathes, milling machines, so really conventional stuff. But when it comes to serial production of 500 and more components, then we wanted to rely on specialists. And here we've been lucky not only to find the right partners by time over years, we've been lucky as well that this entire redevelopment of Swatch Group policy about the ETA movements and more did create a lot of free capacities at small family businesses in the Swiss Jura. ETA, after they started to reduce the movement supply to other brands, they not only been using all those movements on their own, they in fact started to reduce the volume of movements produced. And since they have a lot of factories, plants which are producing the parts, and in addition, they had as well external suppliers, they started to cut all the external suppliers. Which means, for instance, the mainsprings, for instance, there is one company called Schwab-Feller in Büren, nearby Biel, and this Schwab-Feller, for instance, lost all the orders from Swatch Group because Nivarox did not need to produce that many hairsprings anymore, so they could produce more mainsprings to serve the entire group and their need, but all those companies outside Swatch Group left all their orders. And those companies, luckily, been searching for reliable partners again. And with quite a few, we are connected meanwhile with a very, very steady partnership, with a very reliable partnership, as it turns out to be a give and take. I'll give you another example. This, where is it? Ultra is the company which is doing all our rotating parts, or most of our rotating parts. They are doing our pinions and all those kind of things. And they used to be the main producer for ETA winding stems in the past. They lost all those orders, and they approached us, and we used, and especially they used, the collaboration with us to go beyond. The two guys who are running those family company, they took over the company from their father, and they wanted to expand their skills. And they approached us when we ordered our very first parts, and they said, can you help us? Can you help us to redesign parts? We once in a while get from factories, we get the demand for parts, but those parts are not well designed, not well in the sense that it fits the designer's need, but it does not fit our need for the production. If we redesign these parts, we can produce them much easier, much cheaper, much quicker, and in better quality. So, and this was what happened with quite a number of those small family businesses, where we started really to collaborate. The industry did their own thing, including verticalization, and there is a growing group in the background of watch industry, which is working on a very sustainable level, and with a growing tendency. It's very, very nice to see this development, and yes, I mean, we are talking on one level. When big groups approaching them, they not only provide their drawings, they provide as well the price they want to buy, they want to pay. So by giving them the room, not only to work on the very highest level they are able, as well to live, it makes a completely different collaboration. And this is how most of this network is created meanwhile. And yeah, going further. Sustainability, reliability, responsibility. We're looking for short distances, for instance. So everything is happening within Austria, Switzerland, Germany. And yeah, fairness is very important, and yeah, what we call give and take. Finally, in 2014, early 2014, we had our very first A11s in the very basic version as A11B ready to be assembled. Talking about total components 99, which means 84 different components. Of course, some screws are multiple use, some jewels are multiple use. Standard so far is nothing. Everything has been produced after our drawings. Of course, there is a kind of Swiss industry standard for jewels, for instance, which are kind of standardized. So far, those are more or less produced as a standard, but they cannot be bought as a standard, for instance. 2014, exactly in September, so almost 5 years ago, almost to the day 5 years ago, we presented our A11 in our, at that time, new model Felix, to Felix Austria, an old saying of the Habsburgians. For us, it was the right moment to celebrate after 3 years of hard work. And we made ourselves happy and making Austria happy again. We are not making big again, we make happy. 2016. In 2015, to be honest, we've been struggling a little since the network of the suppliers has not been on the same level as today. So we had to select, we had to find 2 suppliers for every part to be really able to rely if one fails, if one has delays, if one has problems, that we really have parts to produce. And to produce movements and to assemble movements. So in 2016, we took our former existing deadbeat second device, which was already existing in 2007. We redesigned the entire module. This movement is a modular designed platform movement. We put it back on our new base movement, redesigned the bridges, and so the Erwin became reality in 2016. 2018, last year, we completed the mission for the time being with the chronograph version of the A11. Here, the similarity to 7750, 7760 is quite visible. As well, here we tried to remain as similar as possible to the original design of Edmond Capt. Anybody has an idea why? What sense does that make? To stay near the original base? Remember, in 2017, ETA kicked us out completely. This means if we would have not stayed near to the original base, we would not be able to repair our older watches anymore. So that was an important decision we did already in the very first beginning, that it is foreseeable. In 2011, we counted it already as foreseeable that ETA will close completely the supply of spare parts. This is what is today. In this year, 2019, we really completed our mission with the A11 now, after altogether almost 8 years. We are now back at this position where we have been in 2011 when we received this mentioned ETA letter. So this means we have a new movement base. We have all our former existing functional modules, all those small complications back on this new movement, and are able, together with our several suppliers, to keep an annual production of 200 movements a year, maximum. Well, that was, looking back, quite a thing. Looking a little on the costs. So, starting with the first question, does it take 1 million? Yes, on an industrial scale, on an industrial level, it takes 1 million, and it takes even much more. If somebody is working in a similar way, I bet every single serious small watch producer is able to achieve an in-house movement. Compared with industrial brands, of course, we are on a completely level, which follows, or which leads to the next question: does it make sense? Does it make sense? Cost-wise, investment-wise, it is, yeah. It should be well thought over, to be honest, since as the situation is on the market, if you have a look for the movement cost here and the movement cost here, this is a completed working standard movement. This is just the movement parts, not assembled, not finished. Of course, it's a main difference here that we are comparing here about 200 watches with 20,000 watches a year. So that makes a big difference in units, in volume. But this has to be calculated to come somehow to a final retail price, which has to be on a certain level, kind of in competition with the big brands. I leave you with this impression. Some specialists in marketing areas say that this part of marketing is too less, they told us. However, so judge yourself. Does it make sense, profit-wise? What does the industry think about it? That's the question we pose ourselves. Well, we think the industry likes it, what we are doing. So, at least they seem to be somehow impressed, or they seem to be encouraged to, go similar directions. However, we will see who has the better chances in the future. We are looking very positive forward. On our side, we are happy to be among this growing group of small independent brands. We are not only happy, we are proud that we've been able to manage this really adventure on our own. I did not mention the real number. We don't have a real number to the final euro, but yes, it can be much less than 1 million. It can be below 500,000. What does not count in our case is that we are a private company. We are not incorporated, which means that according to our accounting law in Austria, we do not have our own labor in the books. This has to be spared out, which means there are about 2,500 hours of project costs which are not collected anywhere. When we are talking about costs here on this movement, it's really pure investment on the movement parts, on the material itself, and on the tooling. It's about a relation of two-third to one-third parts to tooling. All right. So with this, we are already at the end of our tonight's lecture. Just sharing some views with you. This is, by the way, the entire Habring 2 company. We used to be more in the past already, but we ended up with some staff problems, some capacity problems, some whatsoever. So this is what actually runs Habring 2 currently, plus a lot of really engaged suppliers with their small family companies all over Austria, Germany, and Switzerland, which made this all really possible and happening. So every time I have the chance, I have to thank this really big group of people, which are not only doing our parts and which are not only being great partners, they are as well really great human beings. This is Mickey, by the way. He's taking care not only for the security, but as well as he works as assistant for human resources. My pleasure.
All right, any questions for Richard or Maria? Please raise your hand and I'll bring the microphone to you.
First off, that was an excellent lecture. Thank you very much. And I love your A11 movement design. Are you planning on branching off the 7750 more in the future, or do you feel like a different chronograph approach is going to be the next move?
Well, actually, our chronograph movement as it is in the moment is already pretty much modified away from the 7750. So our basic chronograph is, can we go back here? Here. Is a monopusher chronograph, and first of all, it comes as hand-wound, which is not available, or which is general. ETA movements are generally not available anymore. And what is not mentioned here, completely excluded, is that we have a central 60-minute counter. We have one watch with us of this movement version. So we are already pretty far away from this original approach.
Any other big design changes that you're thinking for the chronograph system, or, I mean, the 7750 is very reliable as it is. Any other ideas?
Our basic approach as the brand Habring 2 is keep things simple and stupid, in really meaning that word, to keep a high reliability and a daily variability on our watches. So far, yes, there are much more refined chronographs out there. There are much more, classic designed chronographs with very high finishing level out there, but we are not talking about the price level of Lange here. So anyhow, it takes us quite some efforts to get the movement on this finish level. So have a look for the finish level, which is quite elevated anyhow. This is about the finish level which we used to have in Schaffhausen in the 1990s on the absolutely top complication models like the Grand Complication, which was a watch selling for 160,000, something like that. So we're quite happy with with that level.
Thank you.
Like,
Again, great lecture. Thank you so much. I saw that, are you now planning also to be working in collaboration with other sort of manufacturers? I know this year Kodoki 2, you're supplying, or at least in collaboration working with them. Is this something in the horizon as well?
Yes, this is a growing part which helps us to get a kind of return on investment on the money we spend, though we are not forcing it. This means we are not looking on purpose for such kind of collaborations, but we are open for such collaborations. The Kodoka is the first movement version, which is basing on the A11. But aside that, we are sharing inside our network as well other ideas which are not necessarily based on our movement. So there will be most probably next year at the SIHH a functional module of Dubois-Debras launched, which went reality in collaboration with us. It started about 2 years ago, and we have the opportunity to use it as well. But we are not the launch carrier. So the launch carrier for those products will be major big brands, as Dubois-Debras needs to refinance the development of those modules. But we're going further. So this mentioned network in the background, it gets tighter and tighter, and then it's really amazing and to see how the trust is growing and what things we can do in the background around the big brands. And luckily, as it is in the moment, the industry leaves us a lot of room.
Thank you for the lectures. It was fascinating. How do you choose the price point that you wanted to compete at? It seems to me that you offer tremendous value, and was that something that you were just naturally interested in delivering value, or how did you decide on that price point to compete in?
Mrs. Habring? Well, actually. Our price finding is based what I learned in the watch industry in the early 1990s. This approach, this calculation key of that time has been changed completely meanwhile. So the industry is far away from that. We like to keep this calculation key in order to maintain what is kind of part of our, not lifestyle, but our own approach as consumers. So this means if you, just as an example, if you have a look what is the Habring 2 company car, you will find a smart. There is no luxury car involved. There is nothing big. So all the Habring 2 watches we are doing are basically watches we like to wear ourselves in a first step, and of course we are happy to find clients who like this. Sometimes we get told you should make your watches more expensive, and possibly from the political aspect we could do that, yes, but it does not reflect what we have in mind, or what is our very personal preference, just simply. So what we are doing with Habring 2 is we do not necessarily understand ourselves as a brand. So the brand, yes, of course, we created a brand, but the brand is not the number one. What we are doing with Habring 2 is basically we make a living. Consider that watchmakers these days are really in a very delicate situation, a foreseeable situation. That one of the major problem for watchmakers, for freelancing watchmakers in the moment, is that they are mostly cut off from spare part supply. This movement was foreseeable. Actually, it started in Austria already 25 years ago. So we very early sat down and thought about what's going to be the future. We will not be able to repair watches in the future. Because of the big groups closing. So what we started with Habring 2 was to find a new way how independent watchmaker, small structures can survive aside the big. And yes, we prove it's possible, it works out, and it's worth to go all the way through. And we hope that not only with this lecture, we hope that with this example, more young watchmakers will feel encouraged to go the same direction.
Thank you. Really great event. You had a slide where you broke down the different aspects of the industry that you have to take into effect. It was like marketing, packaging, design, yes, mechanics. And it's like 4 of you plus the dog. So I wanted to know, how much do you have to balance out the different aspects of, making sure it's functional, but also making sure that the casing is like appealing, and then, so do you try to appeal to the market, or do you just stay true to some type of like principle within the team?
As a small brand, we are able to react, which means it's much easier for us to react than for a big brand. Consider that with 200 watches a year, we are producing cases in batches of, I don't know, depending to the complexity of the model, 10, 20, 30, 50 pieces, maximum 100 pieces. So in case we are completely aside what is kind of sought after by clients, this pre-investment is much less compared with the industry. So it happened in the past several times that we've been buying cases. We're not buying our cases complete anymore since some years. We're producing them with specialists in Austria, every single part. But we used to buy cases in the past in Germany. And we had, in fact, the problem, for instance, that we bought 50 cases and we could not sell them. So then we started to think it over, what can we do out of those remaining 30 cases? And therefore, it's very helpful to listen to clients. Very important, because collectors, they know exactly what they want. And by being approachable, if you call Habring, there is a 50% chance you will have somebody with the name on the phone. So it's very simple to listen. And this is basically what we do. And yeah, it proves well.
Thank you again for the lecture. And I've got 2 questions, please. Do you feel that you were in the right place at the right time to establish your brand and your business? Or do you feel that someone starting from scratch today could start new relationships with many of your suppliers? I guess what I'm asking is, are they still interested in working with folks that have incredibly small quantity demands? Or have the other big groups started working with these small suppliers as well to muscle out the little guy? And the second question, if I may, when do you anticipate the parts supply for your smart car to be cut off?
Can you repeat that, please?
It's a bad joke because the smart car is the Swatch Mercedes art car. I'm just wondering.
This is the official version.
Yeah, when you're going to be unable to get parts for that.
There is an unofficial version. Have we been on the right position at the right time? Yes, definitely. We've been really lucky. We've been really lucky to have kind of born Habring 2 into an on-moving wave of growing independent scene. So we've been really lucky that we started 15 years ago. I think that today it's probably a little more difficult for young folks to start up. However, these mentioned part specialists, since they are really completely cut off from the industry, you have to consider that the industry approaches those producers of parts. They bring the drawing. They dictate the price, and then they ask the question: are you willing to produce this part or not? And if they say no, then they are out. They are just out for good. And so far, of course, they are absolutely open for new adventures, as they have to. A big part of the Swiss watch industry just reinvents itself, and it's a great time right now. We are in the lucky situation that we are already existing. I well remember actually it was the last talk with Mr. Blümlein in 2001, when we're talking about the development of Lange and Söhne the last 10 years. And I told him, Mr. Blümlein, we have to do this, and we have to do that, and we have to change this, and we should do that. I was excited, and I wanted to go further. And I told him, and we should have done that already 5 years ago. And then Mr. Blümlein told me, Mr. Habring, calm down. We had to be on the market first. Now we are there. Now we are existing, and now we are going on. And yes, I mean, we are kind of. Are we? Yes, I think at least we are within this group of small independent brands who are maybe taking on the role as being a kind of icebreaker for the young generation in the future. I hope so, at least. I hope so.
Okay, I think we have time for 2 more questions. There was someone back here that raised their hand earlier. Yes, in the back, and then we'll come up here to Lucas.
So I'm quite intrigued by your perpetual calendar, in that, if I'm reading this right, it knows there's to skip a leap year every 100 years. I mean, can you just say what's the slowest rotating part you have in this watch?
It's the 4 years wheel.
Really?
Wow. So
okay.
the wheel which drives the leap year indication. Yes, it is. It is. It's not my fault. It's not our fault that the Gregorian calendar is as it is.
Okay, we'll have one more question, and I'm sure that Richard and Maria will be available for more discussions afterwards.
Hi. So in the breakdown that you're listing where you spent your money, I noticed that the marketing, well, you brought up that the marketing was quite low. It was maybe 1/10 of what some of the other guys were using. And you don't have a celebrity spokesman or anything like that. So do you have a unique methodology for getting your name out there? Or how do you get your name out there to get people to push buy units?
yeah, our approach is the very traditional classical one, which is probably really old. We are just trying to do the very best watches we can do. And we try to please our clients. We try to make them nice watches, good watches, reliable watches. And if they are happy, then they spread their happiness. That's the simple thing. We don't need big advertisings, luckily. We don't need testimonials, luckily. Though there are, as an Austrian brand, of course, there are some celebrities in Austria wearing a Habring 2 watch, but you can bet on that all those people paid their Habring 2 the full price, and we are proud of that.
Let's give Richard and Marie another hand. All right, the next lecture is Monday, November 4th, and we have David Walter, the famous clockmaker, coming out from Santa Barbara, California. So we're looking forward to that. Make sure to mark it on your calendar. And good night, everyone. Thank you for coming.